failure should be fun. So, like, even if you fail a check or you make a decision that seems wrong, we try to think about, okay, well, how can we make this failure actually an interesting outcome that the player is not going to want to get rid of.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to episode 64 of the Sandbox.Space weekly podcast. I am your host, Chris, joined by Pumpkin. Baby is over there with her treat, and every week we have a special guest. This week's guest is George. How are you, George?
I'm doing good.
So I'm doing something a little bit different for these couple episodes. Normally I grab something that's on the in the news and we kind of talk about it, which we are going to do briefly today because we cannot go through a week without talking about GTA 6. But last week we had Marcus Sensi on, and we talked about game design development. We talked a little bit about art, and I wanted to bring you on to talk about game writing, Pumpkin, because a lot of people have interest in it. And then also, I think we're going to do games writing is going to be one of our themes this year for GDEX. So I figured who better to have on than the man, the legend himself. So first of all, have you been, we'll just talk about right off the bat. It seems like everything's working.
Sure.
Sorry if I seem a little frantic. For some reason, we had tech issues this morning. But did you see the GTA 6 reveal trailer yesterday? Did you hear the news?
I actually did not. I have been, as you probably know, so busy running the company that I barely get to come up for air, and I did not even see it.
All right. Well, what about audience? Have you seen the teaser trailer yet? I'm going to pull it up here. Are you a GTA fan, George? Or is that a little outside?
Not really.
Here?
No, not really. I actually I don't play a ton of AAA stuff anymore. I've gotten more. I mean, I do a lot of like ISO RPGs and more indie stuff, and that tends to be what we make. And so the really big action games and stuff, like if I play them at all, I only play them a little bit just to sort of see what they're about. And I'm not like not a big actiony, twitchy kind of player.
Oh yeah. Well, I think we can watch this just for fun. George, I'm just going to throw it up on the stream, so you have to check out the stream if you want to see it. But let's just watch it for fun real quick. And then, I need to get out of full screen mode. OBS doesn't like full screen.
What you doing up there?
I'm just fixing some leaks.
Seriously, dude, you got some time on your hands. I got some properties with paying tenants.
Oh, that's why you came by?
Just go get me my checks.
See you, Brian. Love you, Jason.
This game looks insane.
I'm actually watching it separately because I'm not able to see your stream, but I'm watching it on YouTube.
I'm here for Lucia Caminos. She's supposed to be getting out.
What's your name?
Jason Duval.
I seen you here before.
You might have. Hey.
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 We happened to be at the same party.
Hands above your head, now!
You, stay.
I remember in the time
The new beginnings.
You break the news, isn't it? Trust me, this place is just the start for us.
Ring the bell! Shots, baby!
The only thing that matters is who you know and what you got.
Gonna do this? We're doing it right.
Yo, D, this full effect? And they got your name, address, they got everything.
Us cops, we gotta protect each other.
Yeah, that looks nuts.
What do you mean, bro?
Yeah.
We got this.
Some of these, like some of the really big AAA companies can just do things that are so far beyond the capacities of companies like mine. And it's just like, wow, that took like how many like hundreds of people and
We got more guns than a law
Oh, totally.
Hey,
Yeah, I mean, just the animation.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, the big thing I'm always curious about with these kinds of games that have really high production values is how much. I haven't really played a GTA in a couple versions now, because like what I do is much more like player choice and branching and choices and consequences, and a lot of the stories, at least in the ones that I have played, have been much more linear, and it's like there's a lot of things you can do in the world, but like the story and the narrative is just kind of like bonk. It's just the straight shot.
Yeah.
And maybe it's changed, I don't know, but that's always what's most interesting to me in games. So like these ones that look amazing, they look amazing, but like the stuff that I really get excited about in games, a lot of times they don't take advantage of, which is a little bit unfortunate.
For sure, which is something we're definitely going to talk about when we talk about games writing and sort of the design here. Yeah, I got, I know a few folks that work at Rockstar, they pinged me when yesterday morning, they just sent me like the trailer and the website. Of course, the website was down when I tried to go to it, but I felt like this was kind of like a show off for their animation. And obviously, like the graphics as a whole, but just a lot of the animations. Like, this sounds funny, but we were talking in class about jiggle physics the other day, and just like how that has come such a long way. And it seemed like they were showing off like what they could do. But you think about like skin movement, texturing, and movement on clothing is always really challenging. And so it's kind of cool. I don't know if you saw. You don't see many movies, do you? Are you a movie guy?
Not anymore. Just whatever's on Netflix and whatever I can get on demand and everything.
So the other week I went and saw Sinners, which is it's got Michael B. Jordan in it, but he plays two characters. They're twin brothers, so he plays both of them. And there's a little pumpkin. Find a seat, sweetie. There's a little segment in the beginning where it's obvious they're just trying to show off that they can do this dual role tech really, really well. And like one of them's like smoking and the other like lights the cigarette. This is all in real time, no cuts. The other lights the cigarette and then the other passes it to the other one who grabs it with his two fingers and then smokes it, and they kind of go back and forth. I kind of got a little bit of this where they're just like, yeah, this is what we are in. But I agree. I think we talked about this eons ago, I think, on the show, but like player choice and in building more simulations and options is something I would like to see more of, because I think we've kind of hit, there's always better graphics you can do, but I think we're kind of getting marginal improvements on a lot of stuff. So, for me, like ray trace lighting and stuff is cool, but like I ain't going to spend $4,000 on a PC to get ray tracing on my lighting. I just don't care that much. But creating different encounters, and I think the thing that GTA has always been good at is like that emergent gameplay. It's like creating that system that creates stories because of the way the world functions, which means it's just a giant simulation, right? So instead of having to necessarily script out or design, decision tree out those experiences, they kind of just throw you in a world and be like, all right, what happens, But for you really like, I guess, like the more like narrative system trees. Is that kind of like how you can create decisions and have them then cascade down through the rest of the game experience?
Yeah, I mean, so, the GTA games and a lot of the games that have more of the emergent gameplay, I see them almost more like a toy. So it's something that is, you can play around with and you can create your own stories, and things are going to be happening as a result of you shooting a bunch of people. You're going to have a police chase happening, like, and that's fun, but it doesn't get to the depth of a narrative with emotional impact and with characters who are acting in ways that are consistent with their individual personalities. And what we do, I mean, maybe emergent procedural gameplay will eventually get there. I mean, in some ways, it sort of does, like Dwarf Fortress and games like that are kind of an example of how you're seeing a narrative playing out. But it is still a procedural narrative, and a lot of the emotions are sort of in your head, like
Sure.
you're ascribing them to your characters. Whereas like what we do and what the games I particularly love do is creating that like that bespoke story that someone thought about and is uh, it's more of a collaboration between the person telling the story and the player, right? Where the player is making decisions, and there is a finite number of things that you can do, but it is still a story that is changing in reaction to the choices that you're making. It's much closer to what I come out of, which is tabletop D&D, which is how I started in all of this. It's that like back and forth between the DM or the storyteller and the player, and that's more the experience we're trying to create in the games that we make, and what a lot of RPGs do. And I haven't seen a lot of the games with like these really amazing visual budgets trying to lean into that side of what games can do. Like you look at Skyrim, and it's just a linear story, and there's a whole lot of stuff you can do in the world. But the story, the actual narrative, is basically a straight shot. There's not a whole lot of decisions that you're making, which is unfortunate because these companies have massive budgets, and there's really no reason they couldn't lean into that more if they really wanted to.
Sure.
But that's not what they're focusing on right now. I can't speak to this one because obviously I haven't been following this one that closely, but I'm guessing they're probably going to be doing it much the way they used to.
Yeah, so I think actually Tom mentioned in chat that it seems like they're probably maybe pulling back a bit because GTA 5 had 3 characters that you could kind of switch between as you wanted to. And I think some people felt that maybe created a little bit of a disjointed narrative experience. Obviously it's sort of like, it would balloon out and you could do some stuff and then it would kind of funnel back in to a main story, and then it would balloon out again. So there were those like major beats that you would hit. But I've always found it really, so what you mentioned, that was something like Cyberpunk, people brought up. There was like, oh, they're not really like decisions that you make that really have any meaningful choice. And I could see that. Even the same with the Witcher. And the thing I wonder is it just too expensive? Like GTA 6 is reportedly going to cost around $2 billion to make. So my guess is you've never worked on a $2 billion property, since this is the first one. So, the idea that like you're going to create all these sort of like changes that permeate throughout in some way on such an expensive property, it's just a lot of horses to wrangle, But
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
no, I think it could be done. I mean, I think it couldn't be done in the sense that like on this path you're going to blow up half the city, and on the other path you're not. Like, but I think in terms of characters and what's happening to your personal story, that's not going to change. That's not going to cause the whole city to completely change. So I actually think it is possible, because you're really just dealing with characters and dialogues, and is this character here? Is this character somewhere else? Are they running a nightclub now versus in the street? Like, I think there are things that can be done that would not be massively impactful, especially when you're dealing with a $2 billion budget.
Yeah. I think I don't know. I want to say maybe Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3. That as a trilogy probably is the AAA game that had the most because like
Yeah.
characters can die.
Yep.
You know, there is no like. I think one of the things that they should have done, in my humble opinion, but I'm cruel, is I think they should have had like a real fail state where if like you totally fucked up in Mass Effect 1 and 2, when you get into 3, it would be almost impossible to win in this situation, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I think a lot of people also had gripes with the ending came down to choosing, you know, one of 3 colors, and then that gave you an ending, you know, like it could have been. But within that journey, there were definitely those moments, like you mentioned, where this character is doing something or this character could make a decision that would result in them dying. But yeah, you don't see a lot of it. And then my thought too is I guess it really ultimately depends on the type of story you're trying to create. Like if you have the narrative bumps and you have that emotional thread that you want your players to experience, then that's what you're kind of designing. So how do you see the kind of two differences between like, I have a really kind of tight story that I want to tell as opposed to amplifying the player's freedoms and how they experience that story without just doing like a bunch of side quests, right?
Yeah, I mean it is two very different worlds. So I've seen pieces of the AAA, the high budget AAA world. I worked at Obsidian and InXile, and I worked at Bethesda a little bit. And although it was on the online side, not the main studio. And there are two very different philosophies. So I think a lot of these big budget games, the philosophy comes more out of Hollywood, where it's like we are going to craft a story with all the Hollywood formulas, and it's bringing in people who have sort of come out of the tradition of screenwriting, maybe sometimes fiction writing, and it is very much about like, nope, this is the correct, you are going to experience the correct story that we have designed for you. And then there's the philosophy that comes out of the companies where I've worked and a lot of smaller, more indie places, where it's like, no, like what's really interesting is what the player wants to do, and making a story about the player, and making sure that the narrative and the important characters in the world are reacting to what the player wants to do. And it is very challenging. It's a really hard transition for sort of those traditional writers who come out of that more traditional screenwriting approach, are used to dealing with. And I think a lot of them would actually say, no, you that's what you guys are doing is not the best way, is not the best experience for a player. And they've got arguments for that, and that's fine. I disagree with them. But I think that the thing that games can do that's unique is that we can, mimic in some ways the tabletop experience, and we can have a story that reacts to what the player wants to do, and you can have a strong emotional experience no matter what path the player goes down. It's hard. It's harder than writing a single narrative experience, but it's also a challenge, and it's fun, and it's interesting, and it allows the player to express themselves in the game and express the way they want the story to go. And I find that a much more interesting thing to work on than just sort of a script that is going to always play out that way no matter what.
Okay, so it sounds like you like the challenge a bit of this sort of writing style.
Yeah.
You're like, oh yeah.
That's what's fun. Like if all I was doing was sort of writing scripts, I would go to Hollywood. Like if that was what was exciting to me, I'd probably be paid a lot more too. But sure. Like I find it so much more interesting and exciting and like challenging on a day-to-day basis to be doing this kind of storytelling as opposed to the traditional kind.
Okay. Well, I guess when you're thinking about creating a game that's going to have that sort of branching decision pathways, like how do you even get started? Like what is the process to get started in thinking about your narrative?
I mean, it's that's probably a few hours talk if you.
Well, you got 5 minutes. Go.
I got 5 minutes. Yeah. So
we have a lot of students on the chat, so I'm trying to ask questions kind of from their perspective as well.
Yeah, I mean, some of it, a lot of times it starts with world building. Tim Kaine, who I've worked with a little bit, and we chat now and then. He has a YouTube channel where he talks about a whole lot of game development things. And he's for those who don't know, he's the original creator of Fallout, like old school original Fallout, not Bethesda Fallout. And he has said on a number of his his videos that he kind of does a 3-part process. And I agree with this. Like when I first heard this, I was like, that's pretty much what I've been doing too. So it totally, like, I agree. He starts with setting. So he like creates his world and what are the core parts of the world and what's this place about. And then he goes and creates a story. And that's what are the events of the story and what's happening and who is the player and what is the player trying to do? What's the threat to the player? And then he goes and does gameplay, and systems. So it's that setting, story, systems. So he feels like you can't really create a story unless you have a strong setting, and you can't really create systems until you have a story and you know what your player's doing. And there are people who approach it different ways, but that has always worked for me. And since I came to that independently, I feel even more confident in saying, yes, I think that's a system that actually works, because different people are coming up with that same thing independently. So very high level, that's how I approach it. It's like, start with your setting. That's actually what we did on Pillars of Eternity. Start with your setting, then go to your story, and then figure out your systems.
Okay. I feel you. What do you do if you are somebody that's like brought on a project that maybe the world's kind of filled out already, and like, how do you balance those things when you may not have the because I assume that like that process, you probably go back and forth quite a bit, right, between world, story.
There's some.
There's some back and forth. So is it challenging if you are kind of writing, or I guess in your experience, have all those along those stages, they've been pretty open and receptive to thoughts and feedback as you're navigating those different parts?
It depends. So I mean, like sometimes, like you said, sometimes you'll be brought in, if you're a narrative designer, you'll be brought in after there already is a setting. And that's fine. Like then you just have to look at, okay, what is this world? What's it all about? What's interesting about it? What do I want to highlight that is unique and interesting about this world that I can build a story off of? And who is my character in this world? How do they fit into this world? Are they an outcast? Are they part of some existing system? Are they part of an existing faction? And all of that stuff is going to inform what feels like an interesting and compelling story that you want to tell. So you don't actually have to be there for the setting part in order to use that system to create a story, and to go through that process.
What if you come up with like a really interesting idea or a character or kingdom or something that you feel like is going to fit well within that overarching world?
So it sometimes you can do that, and sometimes you can't. Like sometimes you'll be Pillars of Eternity, really good example. So back in 2012, 2013, I was part of that the effort to create that Kickstarter and create that setting. And so Josh Sawyer kind of made a map, and he said, okay, this is where the game is going to be set. And there were some countries and things there. And then I came up with a bunch of the gods and some of the other setting details. And then we brought writers in, and they were able to be creative within certain constraints. So they couldn't be like, sorry, Josh, this map is great and these countries are great, but we're going to go over there. Like it was like,
we're
nope,
going to
that's
crack
not
your
what we're
map in
doing.
half and make it 2 continents.
Yeah, so that wasn't an option, but like that didn't mean they couldn't create places within that world, or characters, or situations, or factions. So there's always, or usually, latitude to be creative within the constraints that you're given. But it is really important to look at context. Like a lot of the best quests, when you're designing quests, a lot of the best quests I have seen in my career come from a quest designer looking at, okay, what's happening in this place? What's unique about this city, town, part of a swamp, like wherever the thing is set, and come up with quests based on that context, as opposed to just like come up with a random generic quest. Because if you're coming up with something that's just sort of out of out of context, generally it's going to feel you're usually going to kind of fall back on generic tropey things that you've seen everywhere, that we've seen 1,000 times. But if you use a specific context as a basis for what you're designing, that's oftentimes the way that you can get something that's more unique and different and specific. And you might be taking some as a basis, you might be taking some tropes that you've seen, but they're going to just naturally be twisted and changed if you're looking carefully at the context that you're operating within.
Yeah. That kind of brings me to a side question, maybe. I think that maybe since The Witcher 3, this is, I'm painting with a very broad brush here, but I think we've seen a really big jump in the quality of side quests, particularly among RPGs. And I would say that that's probably, I think The Witcher 3 on the AAA scale really pushed that, where I don't intend to throw any shade, but I'm just going to say I find like a lot of the like Assassin's Creed style maps and quests to just be kind of like really whatever,
It feels kind of paint by numbers.
Yeah. You're going to an area. There's like 8 different types of things you can do, and then you're just doing them. You're like, this is where I climb the tower, and this is where I do the follow quest and the whatever. But it seems like side quests have really grown. Like, again, Cyberpunk's one of my favorite games, which again, a CDPR game, just like The Witcher. I think that the side quests in that game are, there's a couple that I would put in there as possibly some of the best quests of any game ever. And so I'm kind of curious, just your experience over the past, say, like, I don't know, 15 years or so, and how you're seeing like the creation of side quests. Is there a difference in how the process of them is being maybe designed and developed that's leading to the kind of better side quest experiences than we used to have in the 90s and 2000s maybe? Again, very generic question, I guess, but
Yeah, it's a good question. I've never worked at any of those particular studios, so I don't feel like the process I've seen of side quests has changed that much. I mean, certainly they are taken more seriously in the sense that, well, actually, I'll give an example from the Pillars of Eternity games. And I actually thought the quests in Pillars of Eternity were the first one. The second one probably too. I didn't get all the way through it, sadly. But I felt like those quests were very well done. And they are taken more seriously as self-contained stories. So we would think about things like, is there as we put it, is there a change of expectations that happens as you're going through this story? So like, you're told such and such is happening, somebody ran off with my wife, what's going on? Go find out what's happening. And you go out into the world to investigate this, and then it changes direction in a way you weren't necessarily expecting. So I think quests, maybe back 20 plus years ago, would be like, okay, go kill me 5 kobolds, or go, I don't know, get me my golden chalice back. And you would go out and you would get the chalice, and you come back and the person would say, thank you very much, here's 50 silver pieces. Whereas like now, I think there's much more of an interest in each side quest being a story, and something unexpected happens, and then as a result of that unexpected thing, you have to make a decision. So it's like, oh, the situation isn't what I thought. Now I have to make an ethical decision. Do I do what I was originally brought out here to do, if that's even possible anymore? Or do I change my mind and do something else instead? So it's that combination of the change of expectations and the decision that the player has to make, and that tends to make a quest a lot more engaging and interesting. Like I saw that a lot in The Witcher 3, where like it's a lot of it is investigation quests where it's like there's this weird thing happening, what's going on, and I use my Witcher abilities and I find out, oh, okay, it wasn't exactly what I was told at the beginning, it was this other thing, and now I have to decide what I want to do about that. And that's just way more engaging than go out and get me my challenge, then come back and it's just exactly what I thought it was going to be. So there's a greater emphasis in side quest creation of it's not just what you thought it was going to be, it's something more interesting, and what is that? So there's more of a challenge for us as quest designers.
That's actually really interesting. Like the way you phrase that is kind of, yeah. So for example, in Cyberpunk, there is a side quest where there's this bartender that you just kind of know occasionally, and he thinks his wife is cheating on him, or he's not sure. She's acting suspicious, and so you go and you follow her because he just notices that his kid doesn't look like a blend of them. Yeah, like their child looks very different, right?
Yep.
And so he's suspicious. And so then you go and you follow her, and it ends up being that like, no, she is not in fact cheating. It's just she's had a complete body modification. So she doesn't look anything like she did, but that doesn't change the genes, right? So her genetic material is still the same.
That's cool.
So the child actually does look exactly like a blend between the two. It's just she doesn't look how she used to look. And then so you have that twist, but then there's a further twist, which is your job was to find out what was going on and report back to him, but she asks you not to, and that. And then you have a choice of being like, well, I can tell him, I can tell him the truth. I can tell him, but lie about what's going on, or I can wait and allow her to do it. And she may, whatever she says is whatever she says, right? And so it puts you like, now you're conflicted because it's like everything you thought was true is not true. You were also hired for a job, so you have sort of like a professional obligation. But then now you're in the middle of this marriage where you're just like, what is my place here, right? And so that quest perfectly sort of formulates what you just laid out as a sort of like a template or a structure to build those out. And
that's a perfect example.
Good. Well, I'm glad I thought of it then. Like I did something. I just played a video game and thought of something. They're the ones who made it. But yeah, I think that's very true. And I think that even in The Witcher 3, they sort of, I think maybe it'll show off a little bit, but there's the frying pan quest, which I think is specifically designed to make fun of older style side quest design, where you're supposed to just go out and find a frying pan. And you're like, this old lady tells you to go find this frying pan. You're like, okay, fine. And then stuff happens. So yeah, I agree. I think that as I kind of watch people play maybe Cyberpunk or games like it, you'll sort of see like, oh, they'll be attracted to the main narrative thread that's going on. But it's always interesting to see what side quests they really emotionally connect to. And if you can even do a sprinkling of like the side quest impacting the larger story in a way. It doesn't even have to be massive. Like you said, it doesn't have to be like the world's blown up or something. But it could be something where like you meet a character later on and they interact with you positively or negatively in some way or something like that. Like all those things sort of lend to the larger feeling of the world, which I think Cyberpunk does exceedingly well. I've also, I don't know, you probably haven't, with how busy you are, I've been wanting to get into Baldur's Gate 3, but I can't. A 200-hour experience, I'm just like, oh man, I don't know. I feel like I'm getting married or something.
Yeah, that's how I feel with a lot of the AAA games now. I have played some Baldur's Gate 3. I got through most of the first act, and then I didn't get beyond that because there was just so much going on. That's a very, I mean, they do a nice job with quests. That game, my experience of it was there's almost too much. Like there's so many different ways to approach things. and they're not telegraphed that well. So like the quest that you just explained, it was like, okay, there's some basic game systems that I'm using to solve this quest, and then I realize, okay, here's the situation, and then my options are pretty clear, right? It's like I can tell the husband the truth, or I can hide it, or whatever. So there's like a few different options, and it's very clear, and I have an interesting moral dilemma.
I suppose you could kill
In
the
Baldur's Gate,
characters too if you wanted.
you could just murder the characters as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's always an option in a lot of these games. But in Baldur's Gate 3, it's like if I have the ability to turn into a chicken, I can go do this completely other thing. And oh, I didn't know that I could also use my turn into smoke spell and go over here and do this, and that's another way of solving the quest. So like there's so many different ways of approaching things in Baldur's Gate 3. And it's not, I could be wrong about this, but the quests that I remember weren't so much like the one you described, where it's like, you have like a number of different moral things. It's like you have so many different ways of approaching the quest based on like, do you know how to use this system? Do you have this spell? That it's just overwhelming, or at least it was for me. And I ended up sort of doing a lot of the things in the game sort of the typical way. And they did have some cool moral choices as well. But like some of the permutations that you would see online of like, oh, I did this quest this way. It's like, I didn't even know that was something I could do. Like that was never even tutorialized. So that was a little bit frustrating. But overall, I mean, it's a great RPG.
Sure. Yeah, I think telegraphing is a big thing. I think this is something that, strangely enough, outside the RPG world, I think Nintendo is excellent at providing you a set of tools and then allowing you to use those tools in a way where you can accomplish goals. Now, in some respects, again, that's an unfair comparison because you're not having dialogue conversations and things like that. But one of the things I have noticed, too, about some of these RPGs is that violence kind of is an answer in a lot of ways that people don't want. Like I was just watching, there's this streamer I'm trying to potentially get out to GDEX. I was watching her play Cyberpunk. And I just noticed that sometimes she would resort to like the violence as the answer, where she could have used a dialogue option or snuck around the back, or there was any number of ways. And I'm just kind of curious, your thoughts were like, I think we're kind of conditioned in games to use violence as a response to solving our problems, that I think a lot of times people don't even realize there might be other ways to go about this. Curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, well, part of it is that like if you start a game and the majority of what you're doing is murdering things, the first thing that's going to come to mind is I should go murder that thing. And then yes, on top of that, like you implied, like so many games are about killing stuff that like it's just sort of what you expect when you sit down. And like I for back when there was E3, and then whenever there's GDC or Gamescom or whatever, and then all these trailers and things come out, it's always like the vast majority of the gameplay I see is murdering stuff. And maybe it's just because I'm in this industry and so I'm just steeped in this all day, every day. But I get tired of it. It's like, oh my God, can we come up with some fun gameplay that isn't shooting stuff or murdering things? Like, I guarantee there's ways of making fun gameplay that is not just killing stuff. And I've talked to other devs about that, and a lot of other devs feel that way too. But it's like we always end up kind of coming back to that because we know how to do it. Players are accustomed to it. It doesn't require teaching them anything new. And it meets its expectations. But like there's so many RPGs, especially, there's so many different kinds of RPGs you could make that put you into various roles that are not primarily about killing. And like we have lots of brilliant systems designers. Like I know there's ways of making those activities fun, and we've seen a few of them here and there that occasionally pop up, like building and things like that. But like making an RPG that isn't just about murdering stuff, to me, is a really interesting challenge that I would love to do.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, it's just that unfortunately, like most game companies are risk averse and they just want to make something that's going to make a lot of money, and the easiest way to do that is to fall back on what you know how to do.
Sure. Yeah. Again, I'm very curious about the new Cyberpunk game, which we're probably like 5 years out from or something at this point. But because they added in, interestingly, as they updated it, they added in some conditions that only occur if you choose the violent route. So for example, there are places where like if you sneak in and do the thing, you leave and like everything's cool. But if you go in guns blazing and then as you leave and get in the car to drive away, like enemies will come and attack you because they've gotten a heads up that you went in and the encounter violently. And so it seems like they were testing the ideas of different kind of styles of ways to challenge the player, to subvert expectations if you just go in guns blazing. Did you ever play the new Deus Ex games by chance?
Well, I played wasn't the first of the new ones.
That was Human Revolution, and then Mankind Divided was the second one.
Human Revolution is the one I played. Yeah.
I would suggest checking out. It's really a shame that a couple months ago, Eidos Montreal said they're canceling the next Deus Ex game, and they like fired 700 people or whatever, which I think is a shame. Because Mankind Divided, despite some of its like narratively, it kind of stops at a weird place. It's like obvious there's a second part that's supposed to be happening that we're never going to get. But as a game that gives you options on how to handle situations, it's like,
oh yeah,
and its level design, I think, has some of the best level design. And it's just really amazing the way you can kind of go about handling things. You can do dialogue encounters. Mankind Divided has this interesting upgrade where you can, like, when you're talking to people, like, you can determine the likelihood of them lying about certain things based on like this input you're getting on the screen, which is pretty cool.
Yep.
And I just found that really interesting because I'm generally not a guns blazing guy. Like, I want to live in, like, I want to play the game as if I would be interacting in that world for real. And I think if you're running around murdering 100 people, like, I mean, you should probably be put in jail at that point, right? So I kind of like to navigate that. And then Tom mentioned something about like Baldur's Gate 3 and stuff, and like save scumming, and the idea of doing a decision, revamping the save, and kind of going back. And I think I'm gonna. I went back when the TV show for Fallout came out, and I replayed Fallout 4. So I played it on launch, and I wasn't like super wowed by it. I found it, I don't know, I just found it kind of like boring or whatever. I went back and replayed it when the TV show came out, and I played it on survival mode, which is like you have to eat and drink and sleep, and like you have limited resources, and you can't fast travel, and the only way you can save is by sleeping in a bed. And that completely recontextualized the experience, because now this thing that was boring became like a quieter, like, I'm going to discover things, I'm going to poke around, because everything you found can keep you alive. And if you die, you could hop back half an hour or an hour because you can only save. And so like every decision you made had a lot more weight to it. And you couldn't save scum, right? Like, you're in a conversation with someone, and if you make the wrong decision, you're like, am I going to reset my game to an hour ago? It's just like you kind of live with the decisions that were made. And so I'm kind of curious your thoughts on maybe not save scumming in particular, but crafting sort of those RPG experiences that incentivize people to live with their decisions and move through that experience instead of feeling like they made a mistake and now they need to go back and fix it or something.
Yeah, so I think the approach that we try to take is one of the things we say is like, failure should be fun. So like, even if you fail a check or you make a decision that seems wrong, we try to think about, okay, well, how can we make this failure actually an interesting outcome that the player is not going to want to get rid of and is not going to want to save scum. And it's challenging, but it actually can be done. Like, there's an internal game that we're working on, and I was playing through a build of it, and there was a choice. There's a skill check, and I failed it, and I was like, crap. And then the thing that happened as a result of that was more interesting than what would have happened if I had succeeded. And I was like, well, that's cool. I'm not gonna save scum this. This is great. So the more I think we can pull off that kind of a thing, um, the more you don't have to worry so much about people save scumming because no matter what they do or what happens, something interesting and cool is going to happen. That is obviously a challenge to do and is more work, but I think it's worthwhile. But yeah, I mean, I think failing that, I think what you did, there was that mode that made you want to stick with your decisions. I think it's a great mode to have. I think forcing it on people is not necessarily great because some people want to have that save scum experience. Like we sort of try to design around save scumming, but some people actually enjoy it because they want to see oh wait, I want to see all the different ways that this thing could play out, and then I'll decide which of those is what I'm going to do. And that's not a wrong way to play. That's that person's way to play, and that's totally fine.
Yeah.
So I'm always a little resistant to people being like, how can we design this game so that the people, so that they can't save scum, and so we'll only have checkpoints here and here and here. Like, if you want to play that way and that's your preferred challenging way of play, great. But I wouldn't design a whole game around that and then force people to live with that, because some people just genuinely enjoy playing it the save scummy way, and we're making games. People should be able to enjoy them the way they want.
Yeah, totally. I agree. And I think that maybe some of this is like just we're creatures of our environments, and we grew up in a way where like we didn't have access to YouTube, didn't have access to the internet. Like, we just played the game, and then we would go and maybe replay the game multiple times. When you were a kid, like, we didn't have a 400 Steam wish list, right? Like, we got a game every couple of months, maybe, and we played
like
that.
Like 3 games came out a year that I was interested in.
Yeah, exactly.
That was
like,
it.
We'd be playing them to death. Whereas I've seen, or I've heard it, like, from my students, for example, numerous times where they might watch a whole game on Twitch or YouTube and then go play it. And I'm like, that's just, for me, that's just so foreign, because like, I want to be surprised. I want to experience. It's funny. Like, sometimes I'll do these podcasts, or I might do interviews with people. And before we start, I always ask, like, is there anything you don't want to talk about? And a lot of them was like, well, I can't talk about this because, I can't do spoilers, or I'm working on this game. I was like, I don't even want to talk about that. I think a lot of podcasters or journalists, they're always trying to get like the details. Like, I don't want to know anything about GTA 6 before I start playing it.
Yep.
Right? I want to go in totally fresh. I don't want to know anything about Baldur's Gate 3. I had one thing spoiled for me that involved something around sex in a barn, and I'm just like, okay. And I'm just like, I want to go in fresh, but some other people want to know what's going on, or like they want the overview or whatever before. I've got a friend who really likes movies, but he'll go read the like Wikipedia synopsis of the plot of the movie before he goes and watches the movie. And I'm like, are you a sociopath? Like, what is wrong with you? But to each their own. But yeah, I do agree with you, and I also think that how a player becomes invested into the game is something that, like, as a creator, as an artist, like, you can't really determine, like, you can't, I guess, say like, this is the thing that's going to get you in. Like, you kind of make your ideas and you craft the experience in a way that you think people will follow, but you never know. Some people will just glam on to like the weirdest things sometime, and that's the thing. Or one of the things I find, I actually listen to a lot of women reactors, because I'm always curious about what they tend to notice or attach to. And again, painting with a broad brush, women tend to have like higher emotional intelligence than men do, generally. And so seeing them respond, and there was one I was watching the other day where it was a movie, and she was mentioning something. I was like, I have seen this movie probably 20 times, and that has never occurred to me before. And it was like a really insightful thing. So figuring out what people are going to glom onto is really interesting. We have a question from the audience. What the heck is up with Blarney chickens? So I don't know what that means. Blarney
chicken is Blarney chicken is my handle. on I don't know. I guess it's on a bunch of different things. That goes back to like childhood. It's
Okay.
I'm definitely a fan of chickens, and Blarney Chicken was just something that I found very funny as a child. I think it was the name of a bar or something, maybe in one of my D&D campaigns.
Nice, nice. Well, we're getting a little tight on time, but I'm just kind of curious. How do you, and this is just a personal thing for you, and if other people want to, but like when you are listening or watching to people play and experience the games you've made, are there any things in the back of your mind where you're just like, yes, we did it, like you felt like you had hit an accomplishment or something, not sales numbers or whatever, but within the
Oh
experience
yeah.
itself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, when I see when I see someone, and I actually do watch, I try to watch YouTube videos of people playing my games, and when I see somebody um, agonizing over a moral choice, or better yet, arguing, like when I see online people arguing over like, oh, I did this, and you're like, are you crazy? How could you do that? And they're arguing back and forth. I'm like, yeah, I won. That was a success. And also just like getting emotionally invested in the story and the characters. Like when you see people making fan art of your characters, or when you see people just talking and debating and about characters and engaging with the story that you created. Like if people are spending their time outside once they're finished playing the game, talking about and debating about and thinking about the story and the characters that you created, you have succeeded. And to some extent, I would rather make. And this is like me like burning my CEO card, but I would rather make a cult classic than like a mass market kind of thing, because like cult classics people are so invested in and excited about, and like you have taken a segment of people and made them really excited and passionate and changed their lives, and like that to me is more exciting than just like, oh, we made this many sales numbers. Like I would rather
Oh,
engage with
totally.
people deeply emotionally than sort of just make a bunch of sales.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is probably why we're not leading Activision Blizzard,
Right. Yeah.
but no, I agree. I same with games or movies. Like I tend to give a lot of leeway to games and movies, entertainment, if they're at least trying to do something interesting or creative or unique, even if it doesn't
Yep.
necessarily like stick the landing or it's not as smooth as it could be. I'd much rather have that than play like yet another kind of middle of the road boring game.
Yeah.
Like and one of the things I've kind of found interesting probably in the past maybe 5 to 10 years is that the video game industry is getting old enough now that it has sort of like a real history of its own. And a lot of the older games and older titles that, you and I grew up with are now being reintroduced to people. And an example of that, my favorite game is Chrono Trigger. I'm seeing that starting to make the rounds for younger folks who have never played a game, and many of them have maybe
Yep.
never even played an RPG before, and they're just like they're fans or whatever are telling them to go play Chrono Trigger, and they love it, and they realize that like, oh, like I think Chrono Trigger looks great. I think the animations in that game are amazing, but it's an old school style 2D sprite game. Like it's not going to have that visual spectacle that you might see in something today. But they fall in love with it and they get connected to those characters, and the side quests in that game are super, super meaningful. There's not a lot of them, but each one has its own impact, and that it's directly related to characters and their motivations, and it helps them grow in a way. And just sort of seeing younger folks play some of those games and realize like, oh, this is what games can be. The same with movies. Like there's certain movies like The Thing, for example, like people are just different after they've seen The Thing. Like there's a before you've seen The Thing and there's after you've seen The Thing.
You talk about the 80s, the
Yeah,
80s
the
thing.
John Carpenter's one.
Carpenter, yeah.
And yeah, there's a few movies like that. I think Shawshank Redemption is one where once people see Shawshank Redemption, they're just like, what the heck,
Yep.
And so I think it's really cool that we now are a part of an industry which is, really only about 40 years old or so, 45 years old, which is not long when you think about the grand scheme of, music's like hundreds of thousands of years old, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So it's really cool seeing those experiences kind of transcend time, which I think goes to your thing about the cult classic. Is a lot of those movies, The Thing's an example. When The Thing came out, like, it was not well received by critics,
Nope.
and it did not make a lot of money. It kind of really hurt John Carpenter's career for a long time. And then as the decades rolled on, it got more and more fan base. And now I think it's widely considered to be one of the best science fiction horror movies ever made. And so you just, Blade Runner was another one that wasn't super well received when it came out.
Yeah. And
so,
there's games like that. Planescape Torment, great example. Like, when it came out, people, I mean, it did okay, but it wasn't that big of a deal. And over time, people realized that was one of the best RPGs and best written games that there has ever been. And that really had that slow burn. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I feel the same about, like I said, Fallout 4. I've come to really like and appreciate that game, despite some of its issues. And so I think time definitely brings out those important moments. I hate to say it brings out like the cream of the crop, because that's not exactly the same, but I think it does. There's games that are going to kind of come and go. It's harder now too. I'm sort of rambling, but I was thinking about like something like Fortnite, right? Like, I don't know, is Fortnite going to have the longevity? But that's not even kind of a game in the traditional sense. It's like an ever evolving experience, right?
Yeah.
Like, what is Fortnite? Is Fortnite what it is now? Is it what it was 5 years ago? Even something like World of Warcraft is so fundamentally different. And I think you and I sort of share a common thread. Like, I don't play many multiplayer games. I prefer single player experiences. So I think you and I are similar in that. Well, we're getting tight on time here. Any last things you want to say or talk about before we wrap it up?
Well, I mean, there's lots of topics to talk about. I will say this, like, I think that people don't realize, like, making games has changed a lot. Like, the landscape of being able to get enough money to make a game, being able to pay your team enough to make a game. Like, there's a huge change that's happening right now in the industry that I don't know if a lot of players are aware of it, but like, the cost of making a game used to be sort of a known quantity. And now there are teams in other places in the world that can make a really high quality game, like the oh my god, the game that just came out now. I'm blanking on the name. Clair Obscura.
Oh yeah.
Or Clair, that thing. That's like doing really well right now. That was made on a really low budget by people who were being like, who paid themselves very little and also were living someplace that was really cheap. So now, like, you can, or a publisher can make a game for way, way less, and it is hollowing out like a lot of the US and North American game production, because people here need a certain amount of money to have to survive, because there's a good cost of living or high cost of living here. But games can be made so much cheaper elsewhere. It's just, there's like a quiet, for people who aren't in the industry, quiet revolution happening in games. And being able to get enough funding, and like, how much does it cost to make a game is completely changing, and like, there's huge amounts of layoffs. There's like a whole bunch of stuff that's happening under the surface that I'm not sure a lot of people are even aware of. But like, for those of us who work in the industry, it's massive change in the last couple years and continuing. I'm sure you're aware of that, because we deal with this as bosses of companies all the time.
Yeah, we have spoken about that a lot on the show. Unfortunately, there was it kind of got to the point where every time we did a podcast, I was talking about all the layoffs happening, and so it kind of got to the point where I was like, all right, this week I'm going to not talk about the layoffs.
Okay, sorry about that. Then I should.
No. I'm just saying, like, in general. But yeah, you're right. I think the foundation of the games industry is changing. I mean, I think the foundation of almost every industry is changing right now. And unsure if how much, if any, of it is going to be positive over the long run. But yeah, I agree. Well, man, it's great. Always great to have you on. Are you any way people can follow you? You got any projects or anything you want to mention to people?
Unfortunately, I can't actually talk about any of our stuff. So we're doing co-dev with a large RPG studio that good project pays the bills, and then we're also working on an internal project that's an RPG, much more in the tradition of the kinds of things that I have made in the past. And then we're pitching on some things, and so there's some other projects we may be working on. So I can't actually talk about any of it, but all RPGs, very busy, exciting stuff. But I talk about it when I can. But we do, if you want to follow our company, it's at Digimancy Games on Twitter, but we don't post much right now because there's not much going on. So you can follow us, and eventually we might post something interesting if stuff happens.
Cool, man. Well, George, thank you so much for being on the show. This has been episode 64 of the Sandbox.Space weekly podcast. Of course, we come to you every Wednesday at 10 a.m. on twitch.tv/thegdex, and then we go ahead and post the videos onto our fresh, newly minted YouTube channel. So it's the Sandbox.Space. So you can check that out. And then, of course, we have GDEX right around the corner. So www.thegdex.com. We're like 120 days out. So we'll be posting information on speakers, exhibitors, all that fun stuff here shortly. So come to beautiful Columbus, Ohio, if you want to be a part of that. But otherwise, again, this has been episode 64. I want to thank you on behalf of myself, Chris, Baby, Pumpkin, our special guest, George, and of course, everybody in the chat. We will see you next week.